5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Mosby Learning Podcast. If you can believe it, and you've been listening along, this is episode 20. We've been at it now for 20 full episodes, and this is the 20th episode that we have. My name is Adam Costakes. I'm calling in from Dallas, Fort Worth.
Cynthia
And I
Gibbs
got nobody with me.
I'm trying to think of a good place to say. Not the panhandle of Texas, but close. There.
And you've got Eli Berant from the Great Lakes State, Michigan.
Yes, the Great Lakes State. You know, it's actually pretty funny. I gave Gibbs a hard time this week. We were in a training class, and I was giving her a hard time that every time we do this podcast, she comes up with a different location. So that is probably why. So nobody knows exactly where she lives. And for those who are listening, as you heard, Dan is not in this episode. We gave him a little bit of PTO this week. I know he's out there on Twitter right now. I just saw him tweeting about a bunch of things. So when he's not doing this, he is tweeting about learning and development. And I also thought we could spend, really probably in the next 15, 20 minutes going back into his ATD capability from last week.
Yeah, what was up with that freaky picture? What's up with that freaky picture of him on our? What's up with that freaky picture of him on our notes page?
Yes. Well, did you listen to the episode last week?
Sure.
Oh,
right.
Gibbs,
Well,
it was
you.
rough. I mean,
Yeah, I heard you made fun of me.
who, me?
Yes.
You must be mistaken. I make fun of everybody. And I don't know why Dan was so ashamed. I think he came out much more well-rounded and more balanced than I did. I definitely dipped down when it came off that the first leg of the stool. I definitely have lots of room to grow when it comes to the second and third models that we went through.
Yeah. It was actually, I thought it was a really good conversation. I think we're going to circle back. I think, coming up episodes, I think that is something we're going to continue to talk about, especially as ATD continues to push that. So I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more through ATD of them talking about that capability model. And really, Gibbs, just to kind of recap, to bring you up to speed, Eli and Dan had the opportunity to take that new ATD capability model, which is, I believe, what did we say, 30 some capabilities and 150, 180.
Yeah, I mean, there was a discrepancy on there. It was either 150 or 189 actual skills that were reviewed.
Yes.
So what did they do? They test you, or?
You give a self-assessment.
Okay.
Yes.
Like, 1, I know very, very little, 2, I am an expert, and then being 5, and then you would rate yourself on the 1 to 5 scale.
So do you guys think you were harder on yourselves than you actually were, or?
No. Dan grades himself harder than if I would give myself a 3, where if Dan were to put himself at a 2.5, he'd give himself a 2. So we probably scored within the margin of error. So, yeah.
So a lot of subjectivity, it sounds like, of what each score really meant.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, when we got into the
details
and the there was 3 distinct parts, and the first part I scored myself higher on, and then the bottom fell out when I got to parts 2 and 3. But like we mentioned last week, it was if you scored yourself high across the board, across all 3, you are the pariah of a training individual, because not only can you lead in the classroom and are you perfect in reading a room, but you can also know all the theories, you know how to communicate that all to business units, meditation.
Meditation was a big one.
That was actually in a question, was how well you know meditation. How much how you use meditation in a classroom, which was unbelievable. But it ran the gamut from your frontline teacher trainer in a classroom to high level CLO, moving and shaking on getting training systems going.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. Gibbs, you're going to have to take it after this episode.
I'll pass it.
All right. I'll pass it. It wasn't pass fail.
I'm going to put 5 on everything.
There you go. And you could be a guru of training.
But you just said that you don't do meditation, and that was one of the things in one of the questions.
I don't do meditation.
Oh, well, maybe you should start. You should start doing it in class. So speaking of being a guru of training, Eli, what have you been working on? So let's kind of take a step back here before we kind of dive into some headlines and some big articles here. One of the things that we don't talk about is, what we're doing at our day job. And I know we talk about financials and we talk about some different things, but what are some big projects you're working on right now?
One of the things that I'm working on right now is our main system that our customers use is being redeveloped and revamped. So I work on creating tutorials and learning the new systems and tutorials and making it for the front end, users to be doing that, and that's being broken down piece by piece. So that's one of the things I've been working on. Also, we do what we call semi-annual reviews. So each of the trainers on my team, we own a handful of classes, anywhere between 10 to 20 courses that we teach or classes that we teach, and you've got to go through them, run them through by the business units, make sure that everything in them is accurate and portrayed the way that they want it to be. And sometimes it's rubber stamped, this is exactly the way we want it, and the other's like, why does it look like this? Well, you told us this is how you wanted it last time. But now it's garbage, let's change it. So you got to reinvent the wheel with the same material.
And you're doing that with the business?
Yeah, we work with the business units. We've got usually like a liaison that we have a point person we work with to help develop and review that training material to make sure that it meets the needs of what they would need it for. So that's those are due. They're due on February 15th and August 15th. So those are our dates we picked.
Oh wow, August 15th.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, so
what's wrong with August 15th?
That's a long time. That's like amazing.
Well, no, these ones that I'm working on now are due in February 15th.
2 weeks.
Yeah, but you said August 15th for something else.
No, yeah, they're semi-annual, right? So they're due the first. They're 2 checkpoints throughout the year, one in February and one in August.
Oh. Okay.
So
does that look at your maintenance also for those courses, or is it just overall how's the course working?
Both. So maintenance, making sure that it's up to date. We do, as things change, we update them on the fly and make sure that they're up to date. But also, sometimes things fall through the cracks, and things change without us being in direct contact with the business unit that never got formalized on anything we received. So we just make sure that everything's upright and in good standing order. So that's a lot of what I've been doing as of late.
Yeah. That's a fantastic cadence, actually, to be able to do that, and where your businesses know that it's coming on 2 specific dates, right? February 15th, we have to get it done. We're going through these 10 courses. You're going to
point where it was really difficult. So now you've got that 6-month period to get those done, and it gives you a good leeway to get it done. But also because we do a good job of staying on top of that material, if something does change, and make sure it's done. But we always make at least one focused look every 6 months to make sure that it's in good standing order. So
in your business, the line of business, they're good with that. I mean, you're getting kind of feedback, and they're in this cadence.
They'll come to us. We've built the relationships that if they need something, they're coming to us anyways. And it's just our way to come back at them and say, hey, you've come with us with the new stuff, or you come with us with the changes. We just want to make sure that the stuff that you're not seeing on a regular basis is exactly the way you want it to be.
That's awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah, sometimes until you get a lot of it backlogged, and then you gotta.
Good stuff.
Yeah, sometimes until you get a lot of it backlogged, and then you gotta.
And then you gotta redo it all, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit, Gibbs. I know you've been working on a new project. Without going into details of all the financial boring parts, I know you've been launching a new program here the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so give me code. Is it? Because there's 2 projects.
The one you launched this last 2 weeks that you finished today.
Well, it's not finished because nothing's ever finished, right?
All right. Well, I guess I could take that. And Eli, I wanted just some of your opinions on this and seeing if you're doing anything too. So we just launched a program. So we took some sales training, and in the previous world, it was kind of a crash course. It said, hey, you know what? Do it as an event, and you get trained and you get everything. And recently just redesigned, and this is what Gibbs have been working very hard on, the one project that she finished today, is we redesigned it that a lot of your basics are done and preloaded. So what I mean by that is they're doing webinars before they come to the event. They're doing self-learning before they come to the event. And then when they come to the event, in theory, hearing stuff that it all built on the foundational things. So they don't have to do settings in a system. They don't have to, it won't be the first time they're seeing the system. They can go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, that's a good way to lay that foundation to get some of the things out of the way. You know, the pleasantries, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I always like it when learning anything, right? Get my hands on it. Give me a version where I can get a hold of something and then talk to somebody about it. Because sometimes you go in blind, you get distracted by one, two, or three things, and you're not able to focus and see what really makes it tick. So that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think it worked. I mean, you know, when we first went down this path, you know, it's always one of those like, hey, we've always done it this way. And admittedly, they were doing great. They were doing fantastic. But it was like, hey, we're going to really try and change this up. And when you think about that event training, it goes to an event. How much do they retain? They're overwhelmed. They have so many things. And so now by extending it 2 weeks, I think, you know, Gibbs, I think it went pretty good these last 2 weeks for a pilot.
I think, you know, it was definitely a quick turnaround. I think there was, you know, a lot of different emotions over the last several weeks. I think today we were all, you know, all of us who've been working on it, were pretty much to the point of exhaustion, to the point
You forgot which project you were working on.
Yeah, no, I knew what project. I just didn't know which of the two you want me to talk about. But, yeah, I mean, and it's kind of funny because, you know, and I'm sure you get this too, Eli. It's like up to it. You're like, I don't know how it's going to go. I'm freaking out. It's kind of stressful. You know, we have this part, we have that part. Do we have all the parts? And people keep sending us, you know, different, changing it up on us, and just a little bit of chaos and stuff. And then, you know, when it happens, it's like, you know, I think everyone gets that stress level where you want it to be perfect.
I relish when the lights go on, right? When you're up on, I like, all right, everything you did up to that point doesn't matter, right? It doesn't, like, you got to deal with the way it is. My wife, to kind of put some different spin on it, my wife, okay.
Oh,
and
that sounds like a brutal job.
It is, but it isn't. She's like hands off, like, but she kind of gives advice because she works with the venue, right? So, one of the things that she has heard and she passes along is like to the bride and groom is always like, whatever goes wrong or whatever doesn't happen the way that you thought it was, you're the only one that knows.
Yep.
Everybody else, everybody else that sees it doesn't know. So.
Yeah.
So, like, if something doesn't go the way you thought it did, you're the only one that's gonna be able to tell if it happened or not. So just do your best and make the most of the moment, and that's how you're really gonna learn whether that rule is really needed in the first place or not. Right?
Yeah,
like, I didn't do this one thing; it's not perfect. But if it's, oh wait, I didn't do that, and I was stressing over it, and it actually might have turned out better. Stressing over it, and it actually might have turned out better. You know, so like sometimes that's good for it.
Well, and I think I've done enough pilots through the years, etc., where I know it's, you know, it's a learning experience for everyone. But, you know, we had some people who, you know, this was kind of their first time. They're not, you know, they're not part of the learning and development world. So for them, it was, you know, a little scary and stuff. And so, you know, but I think, you know, there's some fine tuning we have to do as always. But overall, I think it was a good success, and we got some really, in fact, the funny thing is right now, as we're talking about, I just got forwarded an email. Yeah, I just got forwarded an email from a participant sent to one of my trainers saying, it was awesome and a great experience. So,
you got a smile
makes
sheet.
It all worth it. Yeah,
smile sheets are good.
All worth it. Yeah,
smile sheets are good.
Worth it. And they, and I'll be honest too, we were very, very blessed to get a great pilot group and to have such an open and great pilot group that, we're just fantastic. And so that helped it along the way too, because, when you get a tough audience, it can get, it can make it not go so well. But, I think of, it's funny how emotions can play such a big part. I think I do this thing, I do Camp Gladiator, which is a boot camp here in Texas. Well, it's actually in about 7 or 8 states, but we do this thing every July called CG Games, and it's kind of like the boot camp Olympics. And this will be my 3rd year in a row, but last year I had to really learn a lesson because I was freaking out right before it had to happen. Like the first half an hour, I was just like, oh my God. And then when I did it, I just did it, and it was just like a normal workout. But the intensity, the stress, and everything from my mind and my own self-conscious, I put so much pressure on myself. And for some reason, it made me think of that these last 2 weeks, of how sometimes we make it more stressful than it really needs to be. When
Yeah, just got to jump into it. One of the other things that I'm really excited about the program, and everybody kind of jumped into it, is we went from, I mentioned the event, but we were actually able to make the entire course blended learning. And to take a sales course that, a lot of times just that rally of, hey, it's going to be great, and here's a couple things. And, everybody kind of jumped into it, as we went from, I mentioned the event, but we were actually able to make the entire course blended learning. And, to take a sales course that, a lot of times just that rally of, hey, it's going to be great, and here's a couple things. But to get salespeople really bought in on the, hey, here's some self-learning, here's some webinars, now you're coming to your event, and here's some learning after that you can go to. I thought that was a big win. Are you guys doing any of that over where you work, Eli? To really kind of broaden that?
We have kind of, for the division that I work for, which is with the salespeople, right? So I'm in the... that's mainly what I do. So let's say a new loan officer starts with us, right? They get a aside from just the working for a bank, you have to take all of these compliance courses. They also have some introductory webinar where we walk them through the site, the programs they're going to be using on a daily basis, right? And then they come in for a week.
Nice.
So they're staggered, out anywhere from 4 to 1 week before they get to us for that live training. So some folks, they get more time playing in the system before they come in.
So that's what they do, the 3 weeks in between?
Yeah. Aside from working on their business, but...
So is that structured, or is there like a mentor or someone guiding them, or is it just all on the...
A lot of the e-learnings are self-paced. Usually we try to get them into the introductory stuff as soon as they can. So that first week we try and get them, hey, here, let me show you where everything's at, live with the trainer. And then they're working with their manager as their mentor up until the point that they come to see a manager as their mentor up until the point that they come to see us.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny. I just onboarded another employee on our team. I felt horrible because I didn't have any kind of onboarding plan besides, hey, why don't you get your compliance knocked out? And we'll put it in the show notes, and it'll be on the Mosby.ca, this episode 20, but I'll put the comic strip by Clint Clarkson. I don't know if you guys see those ones. He writes all those L&D comics. And I felt so bad because I did that to the new hire. I was like, great, thank you for starting. Glad you're here. Knock out your compliance. In the cartoon basically shows 8 a.m, the person, sitting at the desk, click, 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 click. And each hour goes by. And by the end of the day, they're at 4:30 in the afternoon and they're, heads down and they're just still clicking away. Yeah, I did that to a new hire recently.
It's brutal.
Recently?
Yeah, yesterday.
Wait, I think that happened to me 3.5 years ago when I started with you too.
Yeah, I'm still doing it. Get it out. What was that, Eli?
It's it's one of those necessary evils that it's something that has to be done. It's the best time to do it, right? There is no best time, but if there is a best time, it's before you're busy with projects, right? And you're still trying to make sure you float upright in the water. Why don't you knock these out and kind of become familiar with your environment? Think of it this way: do you guys have tropical fish? Do you ever have a fish tank?
I had a goldfish.
Okay, so you bring them home from the store, right? And they give you that bag, that blowed up bag.
Yes. And
you set it in the water, right, to acclimatize itself to the water that you have in your own tank. That's kind of, are you taking the training, but you're also kind of getting a feel for the environment that you've been dropped into.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
absolutely.
It's very, very, very few people on their first day on the job are they pitching a project that's going to change and going to change what's going on there. So they usually got to find their legs before they do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And once you get going, it's hard, right? And especially because some of the compliance courses we have this past 2 quarters, yeah.
They take a while. It's one of those things. One of those things to get done, but in the same sense, they're very important. So, kind of switching gears here. Let's talk about some headlines. Let's talk about some things that are going on in the L&D world, or just some random headlines here. One of the articles recently, I know everybody's been trying to fly all over the place, go to different areas. I know what I will not fly on is a Boeing 737 Max. That is not a chance. Dangerous plane. I know they're grounded right now, but even when it comes back, I'm not flying on one of those things. And Eli, you brought an article. I think we started to get into it last week about Boeing here, and talking about their simulator training. Is this a continuation? It's just continuing on.
Well, the same article's there, and then the one that we have listed below that, where it says, designed by clowns, Boeing employees ridicule the 737 MAX regulators on internal messages. Going through that article, you know what they always say, a craftsman should never be, is always the first one to demonstrate their material. These people are like, I wouldn't put my family on one of these planes. That is frightening.
So help me understand what is wrong with these planes?
They're crashing.
They're
crashing.
So 2 of them have crashed last year. And they're a very, very, very new plane. So what happened is Boeing said, hey, to all of the companies that bought these planes from them, hey, the great thing about why you should buy these planes is because your pilots are going to need very little training to go from a 737 standard to the 737 MAX. In fact, all they're really going to need to do is take a few tablet courses. Mm-hmm. And that's not working very well, as 2 planes have crashed and 346 people have died. And you may say two planes being crashing, not you in particular, Gibbs, but you as the general audience going, 2 plane crashes, that's not a lot. Well, plane crashes are pretty rare these days. When to the point where a few weeks ago, I know the circumstances were a little bit different. Plane crashes are pretty rare these days. When to the point where a few weeks ago, I know the circumstances were a little bit different. That plane that was destroyed in Iran, everyone immediately thought that it wasn't a crash because they're so rare. like they checked to see was it a 737 Max, and immediately when they knew it wasn't, they were like, well, it probably didn't crash. So to have two of a new plane crash very recently, that's not a good look. And it sounds as if the employees for Boeing, these messages have come out, it sounds as if they weren't very confident in their product from the very beginning.
Either.
No. In fact, one of them said that the plane was designed by clowns who in turn are supervised by monkeys.
So are they saying what the issue is that they're crashing?
Not in particular. They haven't isolated it, or at least haven't made it public. But they are saying that they are going to... It's going to go to simulator now as opposed to tablet training courses.
So they're saying the pilots aren't trained well enough? That's why they're crashing? So they're changing
Yes, that is part of it. So there's a couple things. So from what I've system nor how to override it. So the plane will automatically, and again, now we're talking a little bit above my head, but it will automatically overcorrect and point the nose down. And they weren't training the pilots on what to do when the plane automatically does that. And that's, I think, the Ethiopian one or one of the other ones, that was one of the main reasons that the plane auto-corrected and basically nosedived down. And overall, they went the cheap way, and Boeing said, we're not, you don't need to train your pilots, you don't need to train them. And could they have saved? Maybe, but there's engineer issues, but they also think that it was because they kind of cheaped out on the training. Not good.
They said these planes won't fly in 2020, but 2021 they may come up to be ungrounded.
Yeah, I'm not flying.
2021 they may come up to be ungrounded.
Yeah, I'm not flying on it. Is there any what?
So I was just thinking, is like what's the background history of, what was the whole training project plan? What whole ADDIE process did they follow to decide that tablet training was going to be good enough?
Well, that might go to Gagne's, or I don't remember what it was, but
or was it, we need the training built in 3 weeks?
Well, I think it was more of
cost.
A sale. It was part of the sale. It was part of how they sold these planes to these airlines. They said, hey, that one of the features and benefits, right? One of the features of this plane is that it's very, very similar to the regular standard 37. The benefit is that you're not going to have to spend a lot of money on training when it comes for your pilots. And those airlines bought it, and now they're sitting with a fleet of planes that are grounded that won't see the air.
Probably never go anywhere.
It's possible.
It'll be like the old. So in California, we have what we call the mothball fleets, where all the ships from old Navy ships from the wars are all stationed. And there used to be, I don't know if it's still there, but when I was a kid, when you crossed the bridge, there would be there were about 20 or 30 old battleships that were just stationed there, and that's where they were retired. Just there forever.
Yep. That's going to be the Boeing 737 Max.
So they could have a mothball fleet.
Absolutely. I think everybody is. Southwest.
A record year again.
They did, but I think they're going to be in trouble because I know they're canceling flights. But speaking of investments, let's talk about some training trends to look out for 2020. So there's an article by Training Journal. I actually found this a little bit interesting. I don't know if you guys saw this. It basically talks about... What's that?
I said
I would. I did find it interesting because I disagree with some of the training trends for 2020.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, I thought you were going somewhere else with that.
What do you mean?
I thought you were on board with all these things, but you disagree with them?
I was not. I do, because the number one training trend that they talk about is full venue events. And
I thought you were going to bring up micro-learning. I was like, here we go.
Well, no, I'm all on micro-learning. Micro-learning's in there. But I thought it was interesting.
I saw it, and I was like, great.
That one I do agree with. Look, I know the economy is doing well, and obviously when companies do well, they spend money, but I don't know if full venue events are coming back in vogue as much as they were in the past. I know companies are doing it when you have money, but they're talking about the benefits of hosting full venue events as one of the big trends kind of going forward.
So it's like bell bottoms. Everything is cyclical and comes back.
But you got to think of it this way, Adam, is the modern workforce, right? To harp on that. So the modern workforce is more distributed than ever. You got people working from home. You got people from working, in satellite locations and things like that. So a full venue event is one of the few times you can bring everyone to actually see eye to eye and get things done. So that might be more of why this is a trend, and they don't really go into it in this article. But because if you have such a and they don't really go into it in this article, but because if you have such a distributed workforce that you need to take advantage of times to actually get your folks together.
Oh, that's good. It's kind of going the opposite of what I was thinking. I was thinking about it like being, the old school where you bring everybody together for rallies and everything like that. But I guess I do see your point, because now, people and employees are feeling more isolated and probably not working together. So, all right. I can agree with it.
So
I just came around on this one just talking about it.
Yeah. So old school, because Dan always says I'm an old lady. One of the ways I grew the most, and here it comes. Be ready, Eli.
HSBC?
Yes. One of the ways I grew the most at Household HSBC was because at least once a year, the whole HSBC workshops, and we did philanthropic events, and I got to learn from my colleagues I was in auto at that time, so I got to learn and meet learning and development folks from mortgage, from credit card, from insurance, from retail, from all the different areas from HSBC. And then we also, once a year, our actual team, because auto was smaller, so we were part of credit card and retail. The whole teams would fly up. One time it was to Virginia, another time it was in San Diego, and we'd spent 3 or 4 days together. And then, we got to go to a lot of professional workshops and stuff. But that's definitely where I got most of my growth. That's where my teams really became a performing team. And that really built a lot of the emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And I can see, from a team building perspective, interestingly enough, from my former HSBC days, I actually talked with one of my old district managers yesterday who, we went through lots of those town halls together, and we went through those things, and we just actually synced up. He's in Fort Worth now. So we were talking about a couple things. So what's old is new. You can wear your bell bottoms, get them out for work tomorrow. The other one, they were talking a little bit about online and virtual learning solutions. I think we all agree that those are going to keep coming, right? Webinars, live, pre-recorded. They also go a little bit into
the first one, right? Because he's distributed workforce.
Yeah, they kind of broke it down and talked about video meeting technology. I don't know, Eli, how about in your company? I've worked for a couple of different companies. The company I currently work for does not do a really good job for our remote employees. Like we do conference calls. We sit in the room. We barely ever even remember to dial.
Right, because he's distributed workforce.
Yeah, they kind of broke it down and talked about video meeting technology. I don't know, Eli, how about in your company? I've worked for a couple of different companies. The company I currently work for does not do a really good job for our remote employees. Like we do conference calls. We sit in the room. We barely ever even remember to dial the other people in if they're not integral parts of the meeting. We kind of have a poor etiquette of if you're not in the room, you're not going to hear anything. We talk over each other just because we're so not used to video meeting technology. A previous company I worked for was more global, and they were really good about it. How's your company now? How do you guys use video when you guys are doing meetings?
It's becoming a focus. One of our company just crossed over to where we have more employees that work outside of our corporate headquarters than work inside. That's some of the bigger conference rooms. They're getting one of those, the high-tech cameras are being added to those rooms. So that's being a big focus. The other thing, too, is the biggest way to make sure that you don't overlook somebody on that call is to have them as a video presence. If you don't have them as a video presence, they get looked over and glanced over 100%. I know one of the things that we do is from a training perspective is we, at all costs, we avoid mixing virtual and live classes together because of that exact fact. That person who's on the call dialing in is it gets completely lost.
That's
so
terrible.
unless it's absolutely there's no other way around it, we'll do it. But it's as a training discipline, we try to avoid it. But yeah, it's something that it's a focus right now to become more cognizant of that person who's not. It's a focus right now to become more cognizant of that person who's not in the room, and to make sure that those off-site employees aren't feeling overlooked and left out.
Yeah. Mixing classes does not work at all.
Nope.
It's very challenging.
On the surface, it looks incredibly efficient, but it is a waste of time.
Yeah. I have a remote team member. She's in, a lot of our meetings, and I find myself just even doing meetings, and I feel so bad because I'm like, hey, you weren't speaking up. She's like, because you're all in the room and you're talking.
That's so funny. We had that conversation about you last night.
Oh, good. Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm pretty horrible with it. I need to change that actually and think about it. But I do the same exact thing with meetings. And if you don't really think about it, then you feel, you forget that person's trying to hear, and then they're hearing multiple voices. And it's not that you're forgetting that they're there, but you end up having a conversation without them completely there.
Well, and also, if more than one person is talking, just like right now, they don't hear anything.
Mm-mm.
Yep.
Well, and it was funny because it wasn't like that you
I was like, why aren't you speaking up?
Yeah, she felt all bad.
Why aren't you
She's
talking?
like, you thought I was upset or something. I was like, no, it's just Adam.
No, it's just me. No, that's funny. Yeah, no, it's definitely a hard thing when they're doing that. So it'll be interesting to see how that continues. And, all right, I can get behind this article. I'm going to go back and say, when I started off, I didn't think good about the article. You got me on 2. I think full venue events are coming. I think this video meeting technology is coming. And then the third one that I really kind of poked out here is microlearning. I'll talk about microlearning a little bit, but this
is my favorite one.
Yes.
You know why? It has atom math in it.
Did you like that?
Did you catch it?
Yeah. 1%.
I like how we completely skipped over actionable coaching, or are we not there yet? Yeah, that was like
microlearning.
I know, but we completely skipped over actionable.
Yeah, 1%.
I like how we completely skipped over actionable coaching, or are we not there yet? Yeah, that was like
microlearning.
I know, but we completely skipped over actionable coaching.
It's kind of how my mind works. I go like 1, 3, 5, 2. And yes, I did catch the math on there. The math that Eli's referring to.
Embarrassing. How do they get by the editors?
So the math that Eli's kind of talking about, and you guys can read this article yourself, it talks about an industry analyst, Josh Burson, and the average employee can only allot 1% of his or her daily schedule to training. That's only 24 minutes each day. 1%.
That's 10%.
That's less time than it took me to do my core workout tonight.
But the 1% in the 24 minutes, it's not adding up exactly there.
No,
so I think it was a typo. I think I think it was a 10% there.
But even that, all right, that's not even 10%.
Well, it's 10% of their day.
I just did 10%, but that's 1 minute for every hour, right? Is the way that they just did this. 24 minutes each day. But even if you go from their work day, right? So 1%, how many minutes do you have in a work day? So 240.
Yes.
Right. So Yeah, that's 10%.
All right. Good. Well, so the math's wrong.
It's just amazing. I saw it.
I will
Adam math.
Yeah, the math is bad, but the micro-learning is not. And micro-learning is another trend.
Actionable coaching.
Okay.
If you scroll all the way back up, it's number 2.
Oh, yeah.
Right after full venue events.
Yes. And you think actionable coaching is a trend here in 2020?
I hope it is.
Why?
I'm not saying it. I'm saying it is. I'm saying this article says it is.
Yes. Yeah. And so basically the article is talking about 2020 actionable coaching, no substitute for one-on-one training between employees and managers on a daily basis. Building relationships with the employees and positive feedback when appropriate.
But
I think it's
coming. Second sentence, it says, for this reason, it is highly likely that many companies will begin adopting actionable coaching techniques.
Yes.
Hands-on form of management. Ooh, the sorry, I'm tired. The artificial intelligent one, is at the bottom of this page. And then another one said that EI is so important. And I'm sitting here thinking, they're saying artificial intelligence is huge of us working and learning for robots, but we all need EI. So how do you get EI with robots?
And a silence comes across. I'm not sure.
Are we editing? So we may need to edit that part out. I was just I was like, it's so funny how they're like, we really need to work on emotional intelligence and, making sure people feel this and this and this. And then, then it's always like robots will be helping you with all your work and doing some of your work in the future. But robots have no EI.
Yeah, I don't know how emotional intelligence is going to come into robots there from my fights sometimes with Alexa, because I tell Alexa to set a timer. I didn't catch that. Set the timer, Alexa. Alexa off, and we yell at each other, and my kids start yelling at Alexa. There's definitely no emotional intelligence from her.
Well, and they're not trustworthy at all, so
No. Not at all. But what's interesting on this article talking about artificial intelligence in 2020. Eli, I know we can't probably trust the math on it, but it talks about a 2018 study by Oracle of Future Workplace. 93% of workers claim they would trust orders from a robot.
Yeah, what the heck?
I don't think I would.
Frightening. That's frightening.
Frightening? Yeah, we'll chalk that one up to possibly not the right percentage points there, but I thought that was just a little bit interesting on those different training trends for 2020. That's from
So is that an magazine. EI thing because robots...
Trends for 2020. That's from
So is that an magazine. EI thing because robots aren't emotional? So that's why they would trust robots, because they're more factual and logical when people they feel they can't trust?
I don't know. Could be. I think, the trust thing is going to be interesting with artificial intelligence and what that's going to do with what's happening, in most industries and most different places. But speaking of which, the next article we talk about here is from training industry, and it's talking about the same thing. And I think those are where you're going with the emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
there's an art. Yeah, I think this is where you kind of were talking about it. It's just agile learning strategies for the modern learner. I thought it was actually a really good article, but it talks about artificial intelligence as one of the big things going into modern learning and the different industries. They also talk a little bit about blockchain and how blockchain is going to kind of come in there in mixed reality, immersive digital experiences. And it talks a lot about how to create training for this modern learner who's going to have those different things. And there's really a couple key takeaways of when artificial intelligence, when blockchain's coming in, things are getting more complicated. The jobs of people just working on the line, working at Ford and going and, hey, you're at a printing press, do this, do that task. Those are going away, and they're being automated. So it was talking about having to create training and it summed up the article. It really talked about, hey, you need to map to those individual needs, because if somebody's going to be using blockchain, you have to train them to be able to do that, where it's a little bit different task than somebody working on the line. And it kind of ties right into the trends in 2020 of that, micro coaching and mentoring, because these jobs are just going to be much more complex. So it's not as simple as just walk over there, click there, walk back there, from there. So I thought this one was a little bit interesting also. Do y'all have any thoughts on it?
I mean, this one, when an article like this one is like Blade Runner to me. Like, this is like way out in the future. Like, I don't get it.
You think so?
I just don't. I just think, like, at the end of the day, and I might be merging this article with the next one. At the end of the day, it talks about, no, it's this one, where it talks about how the most important piece that I pulled out of this article is that the learner needs to take ownership. That was the biggest thing that I took out of this article, is that the learner to make sure that they are seeking out change and seeking out how to keep themselves relevant versus any training that needs to be in their way. That they need to be able to consume that training. They need to be able to consume the knowledge and the information, no matter how it's presented in front of them. That's the way that was what I took out of this article.
So I'm not the three of you by no means, because the three of you overload.
When anybody says that, I feel like I'm gonna get
and this is a positive, right? So like the three of you, well,
so you're
not
excluding
Eli
us
yet.
from the positive?
No, so what I'm saying is, well, Eli doesn't know my phone number, but Dan and Adam, they're constant learners, and they're constantly sending stuff they're seeing or hearing, etc. And Eli, it sounds like you are too, where they're constantly, going after learning and taking the initiative into the role. But when you look at the bigger picture and the world and the culture and society as it is, when it kind of scares me where they're saying the learner, they have to take their own responsibility to learn. I mean, I agree with it, but with culture and society today and the way people are, particularly Americans, it's kind of scary.
It's survive and advance is what I see with this.
Yeah,
it's like you need to be in charge of your learning. You are in charge. If you fall behind, it's on you.
Right.
Yeah, and I understand that, but the entitlement that we in this country have today,
Well,
I'm
I
trying
think
to stay nice.
Like if I was
Portland's not going to be happy.
I'll stop.
No, well, I mean, it kind of comes down to, right? So if you're all right, this is a financial world, but if you're a bank teller, your job's going away. If you're a truck driver, if you only got 10 years left, you're good, right? I'm retiring in 10 years, you're probably good. If you're a truck driver right now and you're 26 and you're like, hey, I'm a long haul truck driver, this is great, I'm going to retire doing this, you're probably screwed. You need to start revamping, reskilling yourself. It may not be tomorrow, may not be in the next 5 years, but Tesla's going to have a truck that self-drives, right? Uber's plan right now, if you're a cab driver and you're driving for Uber, right? You went from a cab driver, you're driving to Uber now. They want to, they talk about it all the time. Do you know
what's happening
autonomous
with those Uber
vehicles.
autonomous drivers?
Yes.
They're running over people.
Like in Total Recall. We watched that movie the other day, like in Total Recall.
They're running over people today, but they won't be tomorrow.
You don't know that.
We watched that movie the other day, like in Total Recall.
They're running over people today, but they won't be tomorrow.
You don't know
that. Everyone will be dead because they ran over us all.
I think the example you like to use, that truck driver. I don't see that anytime soon.
Well, yeah, the truck driver, they say, research says, well, articles I've read, I don't know if it's research, are saying, truck drivers still today are the ones that deliver more than trains, or planes or automobiles
in this country. Yes.
And so truck drivers, I think, out of the different blue collar jobs out there are pretty dang safe.
Yeah,
No.
I can't see that.
Now the
5
cashier
years
at my
ago.
grocery store isn't.
So think about this, though. Let's just go back, right? 5 years ago, or 6 years ago. Let's just go back, right? 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, you didn't have an iPhone.
Sure,
Yeah,
you
Like, it
did.
didn't exist. What's up?
You're like
did.
on iPhone 97 right now. My
iPhones
son
came out
came
in
out,
got
like,
2000
okay,
iPhones came out in
what year did it come?
2007.
No.
Yes.
It's been out forever.
No. First
Yes.
iPhone was released. Damn it.
I was running
Okay.
a technical
Fine, 10
team
years
in
ago.
2010.
Yes. 2000. Okay, in 10 years, though. 12 years, right?
But Adam Math again. Adam Math is hashtag Adam Math is a thing. That is a
No,
thing.
but think about it. 12 years ago, the iPhone came out. Like, think about the computing power, right? Like, it's going to advance. It's advancing at a faster rate than ever.
But what's in your
Like,
phone?
it may not be tomorrow.
And what can drive a vehicle around other humans?
It's coming.
It's
Tesla's
But
on
you
it.
know, there's also that whole fact. You know,
Tesla. Did you see the
from,
truck that they
you know,
designed?
Some of
That's the
our
company you have faith in?
representatives say we're not going to be here in 10 years or 11 years now, so we don't have to worry about it.
That's true.
So
Actually,
why
you know,
do we need to learn?
we're going to totally digress. Did you guys see they quarantined that entire city in China today?
Yeah, that's frightening.
Crazy. not see that.
Yeah, I mean, that is
coronavirus.
like, yes, it is basically like
your oranges.
28 days later. Yeah, 28 days later, the zombies are coming. We're all going to die. But yes, you know,
Don't
at
even
the
get me
end of the
started
day,
on zombies. I think that's the dumbest story plot on everything ever. It's the laziest story plot ever.
what do you have against
What?
zombies?
How could you kill the undead? I don't get that. They're already dead. How do you kill them?
So,
You don't.
How do you kill them?
so,
You don't.
If
so are
anything
you
has a
telling
zombie
me you
on it,
don't
I'm
like Game of
immediately out.
Thrones?
I've never seen Game of Thrones.
Oh,
Yeah,
I am
that's
the
fantasy. But
that's fancy,
the
but
I Am
zombies
Legend.
aren't.
No, the zombies are more realistic,
had
right?
somebody
Like
tell-
in I Am Legend, you know, I Am Legend. Will Smith could have killed the zombies. They were after him. I think he had to blow himself up at the end.
Well, he
Spoiler.
did because it was
Great.
the only
I
way
haven't
to
seen
kill
that
the
movie.
zombies.
Get it on Netflix. But I think
The
in the
original
future,
version was actually better with Charlton Heston.
oh, you're so old. Okay, so let's skip over a couple last articles. I want to talk about the last thing here, and if anybody's still with us listening to Gibbs pulling back bell bottoms and Charlton Heston tonight,
Hey,
Well,
Charlton Heston was awesome.
I guess so. And then for those who didn't see I Am Legend, I apologize about that. Just
Yes,
one
Ben.
about that. Just
Yes,
one
Ben
last
Hur. Moses.
Ben-Hur. One last quick thing to talk about this afternoon, and you know I don't
This
have as much.
afternoon.
It's pretty
afternoon,
It's pretty
so-
dang dark where I'm at.
Yeah, we're gonna go to Cap Gladiator. We have a big Australian market for the Mosby Learning Podcast. I think it is
really?
morning there. Yeah, it's morning there. Afternoon, right? 12 o'clock.
I think they're a little busy putting out fires and stuff right now than listening to us.
Jeez almighty. All right. Last thing to talk about here. We're going to talk about a little bit of what this is what happens when Dan's not here. There's no rails on the podcast. It just goes completely to hell in a
Hey,
handbasket
you're the
right
one with
here.
the captain's hat on.
I am with the captain's hat. And you know, at the end here, we'll make fun of Canada too. So we'll just well-round it, make fun of, you know, China with, you know, that, and then Australia, Canada. Let's talk about designing for accessibility. And I thought this was pretty interesting. People who, you know, have different ailments, right? Like how to design training for
Oh, is this
autistic
the
spectrum.
big thing? Okay.
Yes, this is the big thing, talking about how to design training for people with autism, how to design training for people who use screen readers. And it really, I like the article just because it's really simple. It has do's and don'ts, what to do with designing for users with low vision or even dyslexia. I thought that was interesting too. We're not, right? With where we work currently, this does not come up. We're not designing training specifically for this. Are you dealing with that, Eli, at all? Are you going in and actually trying to design for for these different ailments?
No, not actively. And I think that's, again, we go back to kind of what we talked about last week, is you got to look at the sector of where we're at.
Right.
And who we are designing training material for. I don't think those two things
Is this
touch.
school curriculum?
It's school curriculum, but it's also,
Government.
different types of positions that we're not touching. Not to say that they're not out there, but it's just something I don't think our worlds are going to, if you look at like a Venn diagram, we're not touching this one.
No, we definitely are, but
I like
thought
the
there
one
was
with dyslexia.
Which one? What part?
Designing for users with dyslexia, because I probably know 4 people in our company who have it.
We probably do. No, I think, overall, well, we don't go through like in ours, we don't go and, hey, how do we design for somebody who's autistic? But some of the theory in it is probably just good design.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Do use simple sentences and bullets. Don't create a wall of text. You see so many of those death by PowerPoints, right? Do, for people with screen readers, follow a linear logical layout. Avoid content all over a page. I mean, these are pretty much design basics 101 for a lot of these.
To kind of bring it back full circle, too, earlier you asked me what I was working on, and one of the things that we're doing is we're updating material, even when the content doesn't need to be updated, the actual material that's in it, we're refashioning it to be less death by PowerPoint, more like engaging to the eyes. So that's another thing that we're doing, is we're reconfiguring, old standby stuff that, is the same, basically the same as it was, 4 or 5 years ago. We're reconfiguring it to be more digestible and not just, everything fits in the same cardboard box.
Could you even say that you were maybe doing it in a micro fashion?
No.
Gosh.
No, I can't.
No, you can't. All right.
Emphatically.
Bummer. Yes. I disagree with that. No, you can't. All right.
Emphatically.
Bummer. Yes. I disagree with that. Just before we kind of get off this article talking about accessibility, I thought there was something pretty interesting at the very bottom, though.
Me too.
Designing for users with anxiety.
I had that one and the other one, too, I thought was interesting.
Well, I don't know what the other one is. Home office digital goal?
No, think about our first, well, not our first meeting, but, some of those people's first meeting in that meeting this morning. Where it says users with physical or motor disabilities. And it just quickly took me to fire hazard and safety of the room and electrical cords.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a meeting, right?
We had a meeting this morning, and we were trying to fit in. Put training cords down. We'll put extension cords, and like, oh, you can't do that. I'm like, it's fine. We got to get these people trained. So yeah, that is a consideration, but I still go back to this anxiety thing.
This one, I'll tell you straight off the bat, is this is something I have blinders on about. As a person who, like, I don't have anxiety. I don't have, which makes me not very empathetic to folks who do. So
I could
it's something
never see that in you.
Thanks. I need to be extremely conscious about this, because if I don't like pause for a second, like, I don't even think of this stuff, because I'm just like, it's like, you just got to push through it. Like, that's just the way I am, but it's just not. The modern learner has anxiety.
Must have anxiety.
That's how the modern learner
Manager or leader, people you work with and stuff, have that too. So even when you're coaching or managing them or leading them, you got to think of their anxiety levels too.
There was a podcast I was listening to. I bet it was Joe Rogan, but they were talking about like where this rise in anxiety has come from. And
where is it? Yeah, I'm curious on this.
So what they said was that, so you think about the amount of things that you were subject to when you were a child, right? The amount of information, the amount of environment stimulation that you had. Gibbs, you probably had way less than us, just given the time difference, the time span. But if you think about it,
which is why I'm much more well-rounded than you are.
So, but all of us would fall in this category, right? Where you're able to process all of that information, right, in your daylight hours, right?
Yes.
You were able to take it in, chaotic for that time. It was really digestible. Like, you were able to process that before you closed your eyes and went to bed for the night. And what this gentleman was saying, I forget what it was. I want to say that it was Dakota Meyer, but I'm not 100% positive. But he was saying that he believes that it's because we take in so much stimuli throughout the day that it creates this long line of information out the door, and that we're still processing that information in our sleep, and we're not getting enough sleep, deep sleep, that we need to rid ourselves of that information that eventually leads to anxiety. Is what,
and then you're wired up, and then you're always thinking about
depressed more.
Exactly, because they just taking in so much information.
Like that. Yeah, I saw something exactly like that. Exactly what you were saying. Not the sleep part, but that I saw
much
something
information.
like that. Yeah, I saw something exactly like that. Exactly what you were saying. Not the sleep part, but that we're getting so much information, and because we're getting 24 hours of news all the time, or it's always available at our fingertips, that a lot of people are getting anxiety, are struggling with depression, are losing hope, and things like that. And that's where the anxiety comes from a lot.
But the 24-hour news cycle is that because you used to get your news between 5 and 7. That's it.
Yeah, I remember that. And 11
and the
p.m.
newspaper, right?
Yeah.
But now it's on 87 channels, 24 hours a day, and you can't get away from it. And it's just there's just so much information that when you try to shut down for the night, and you are able to get yourself to completely shut it down and get the full amount of sleep that you need.
Right. And it's like what a lot of people do. The first thing that they do is wake up, check their phone, right? Check their phone, check their email, check Twitter before they even get in the shower, before they brush their teeth. All right. With that, we'll put this article on the show notes. I think it's actually a really good one. This is
for a design perspective. I think I really like this, but the most of the content I don't think touches the world that we work in.
No, it's for accessibility. But if you're doing accessible training and you're taking that into consideration, or just an instructional designer saying, what are some of these things, it's a pretty darn good kind of tip sheet. It's not in depth. It'll take you 5 minutes to read. It's pretty good stuff.
And I think you also just never know, right? I mean, we could be talking about now, and in 3 years this is going to be prevalent in our workforce. We don't know.
I'm not designed in this way. It could be. Are you kidding? I'll be dry.
I always love to do possibility versus probability. Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No.
We don't know. We may be working in a different industry. It's kind of like the
self-driving cars. It's possible and it's probable, right?
Self-driving cars and self-driving cargo trucks are 2 different things.
Oh, it's the same thing. Yeah. It's just going to get there. The technology is going to get there. We'll take a gentleman's bet on this one. Within the next 5 years, you're going to see
of the coronavirus in Texas.
Oh, well, zombie apocalypse is coming. We're going to all have to move to Canada with Dan.
Just don't. Nothing better happened to Hard 8 Barbecue. That's all I can say.
Duke and Duchess. We're going to move with the Duke and Duchess.
Oh, yeah, that's right there in Canada, too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have...
barbecue, that's all I can
Duke
say.
and Duchess. We're going to move with the Duke and Duchess.
Oh, yeah, that's right there in Canada, too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have hit it. So for those who bear with us this last hour here, hour 15 minutes. With that being said, Eli, where can people contact you?
Great Lakes Fly is where I'm on in my... recreational pursuits of fly fishing and fly tying, and then I'm also on LinkedIn.
Excellent. And that's Eli Berant. And Cynthia Gibbs, how can people contact you?
LinkedIn with my almost 14,000 followers that
Dubious.
I proved to you a couple weeks ago.
That's because you've been
Dubious.
on LinkedIn since the 70s.
This is true.
It is true.
When it was a
All
yellow-
right,
it was a
and my
phone
name's.
book.
You remember phone books? Gosh, phone books. That's crazy. See, those went away too. The way of the dodo bird. All right, and my name is Adam Costakes. You can get me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. Everybody have a great night. Take care.
Bye.
Adios.
Well, Eli doesn't know my phone number.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, good. Yeah, good.
Hi, you've reached Dan from the Mosby Learning Podcast. I can't come to the phone right now, but if you wanted to leave an unsolicited opinion, you could do that at mosbylearning@gmail.com, or you could check the show notes, mosby.ca/020. And, well, I can reach back to my desk. All right, thanks. Bye-bye. Oh, shit, how do you hang this stupid thing?
Oh, that's so funny.